Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Interpreting the Scriptures. If you thought this was auto mechanics, you're in the wrong class, but you're welcome to stay and learn how to interpret the Scriptures. My name is Brian Smith, and I have been teaching this class for a while. I'm also a pastor, so people wonder, what should we call you? I'm not a doctor, but if you want to call me pastor, that's fine, or Mr. Smith, whatever. So, you know what? Let's dive right in. I'm going to have us go right over to our Canvas page, Interpreting the Scriptures. If you ever get lost and you say, what am I supposed to be doing this week? I always click on Modules. Click on Modules, and every week has a listing of what you're to do. Week 1, don't forget the required date of attendance little thing that you do. Class introductions. It'd be great if you could include a picture so we know who you are and tell us about yourself, maybe your family, where you live, what you're doing at Moody, something fun about yourself, okay? Every week there are lesson objectives. It's always good to look at those to make sure you know what you're supposed to be learning. Study materials. Usually we're going to have some kind of reading from the Duvall book, and then there's 2 weeks where we read chapters from the Van Hooser book. So those are the two for this week. And then there's an assignment and a discussion board this week. The assignment is, sorry to say, an essay. So basically what you're going to do, and I won't read this all for you, but you're going to read the opening chapter in Van Hooser, which is on cultural interpretation, how to interpret the culture you're living in, and then the chapter on biblical interpretation in Duvall. And you are going to figure out what these two things have in common. So here it says, begin by giving your own definition of each of these terms and briefly explain what each tries to do. Well, I'm going to give you a clue. They each try to interpret and understand either the Bible or the culture you're living in. Now, the assignment gets into having you look at this page 45, and there are some communication terms, perlocution and locution. I'm going to help you out with that in just a second. But you're starting by defining what is it that you're trying to do, all right? Secondly, use the bulk of your essay explaining how these two tasks overlap in their method and purpose. Pay special attention to steps 1 through 3 in Duvall, the interpretive journey. So we'll look at that real quickly. Finally, conclude with a short description of why cultural and biblical interpretation, it says, is important. It should be our important tasks for faithfully living out and teaching the Bible today. Why do you need to do both of these? Okay. Now, hopefully this will help you out. I'm going to give you a link to this little handout that I put together. The basics of the journey. In grasping God's word, it says this: keep in mind that our goal is to grasp the meaning of the text God has intended. We do not create meaning out of a text, rather we seek to find the meaning that is already there. So that's the whole, the main thing you got to keep in mind as you're doing biblical interpretation. Stop reading your own meaning into it and ask, what was Paul trying to say? What was Jesus trying to say? What was Isaiah trying to say? We're getting back to what the intended meaning of the author was, okay? Now, I won't read the whole thing, but there's a picture that's pretty helpful here in the book. Here's the ancient culture in which the biblical text was written. And you use tools to figure out what does it mean. Then you realize that we live over here in modern town, Okay. And there is a gulf, a river separating us, and that river is culture, language, time, our situation. So before you directly apply it, the simple one is this: when you read "greet one another with a holy kiss," before you would directly apply it, you say, "Well, wait a minute now. What separates us?" Well, if you greet somebody with a holy kiss today, you might get arrested. We realized that culturally that was an appropriate way to show love and show warmth to the church. Today we live in a different time, especially during COVID. So today, like a year ago, it might have been greet one another with a holy hug or a holy handshake. Now it might be just a holy hi. But notice there's a main principle. So there's this separation between the two towns, separation by town and custom and so forth. But there's a principle. What is that principle? It's not that the kiss is the main thing. It's that expressing warmth. That's what we're to convey. But now, over here in this world, what is the most appropriate way to express that? So I think that's a good picture of keeping in mind what we're trying to do. Now, in the Duvall book, you have these are just the very basic steps, and step number 5 is grasp the text in our town. How should the individual Christians today live out the theological principles? So that is really what Vanhoozer is focusing mainly on: how to figure out the world we live in, the culture we live in. And Duvall is saying, how do we figure this out? How do we principalize it and then get it over here? All right. Now, in Vanhoozer, I'll let you do the reading. He does helpfully end his chapter with 10 rules for cultural interpretation. Now, in your discussion board, you are supposed to try to pick a cultural text. And by cultural text, that doesn't necessarily mean something written. It could be a book. It could be a letter. It could be a billboard. It could be a meme. It could be a movie. It could be a TV show. And what you're supposed to do is try to apply these principles in interpreting it. And then in your post, on your discussion board, zero in on number 4, number 9, and number 10. 4. Determine what powers are served by particular texts or trends by discovering whose material interests are served. Follow the money. In other words, who benefits by this message? And so let me do mine. I was thinking of that Progressive insurance commercial where the man is trying to teach young homeowners how not to turn into their parents. And there's the lady who has the couch so full of pillows that there's no place to sit. And he says, if there's too many pillows to sit down, you're turning into your mother, right? Or the one where he's taking a group of young homeowners through the store, and one of them has their cell phone speaker phone on, and she's talking so everybody in the store can hear something, your parents would do. And he says, no, turn off the speaker. So I'm going to evaluate that one. All right. Who's benefiting? Well, if you're going to do a commercial, the answer is clearly Progressive Insurance. They want you to buy their insurance policy. So that's easy. But it's not as easy if you're analyzing a movie or a song. So ask who's benefiting. All right. Then number 9, discern what faith a cultural text directly or indirectly expresses. To what convictions about God, the world, and ourselves does a cultural text commit us? So there's some kind of worldview that it's assuming that we buy into. And then number 10 is we're supposed to evaluate that in light of the Bible. Locate the cultural text in the biblical creation, fall, redemption schema, and make sure that biblical rather than cultural texts have the lead role in shaping your imagination and hence or interpretive framework work for your experience. So here's what this means. In that commercial, so I'm going to do number 10 first. In the biblical worldview, we're in a fallen world. And guess what? In this fallen world, we get old. And we do become like our parents. In fact, we become so much like our parents that we all die because we're in a fallen world. What the Progressive commercial is doing is basically this. It's saying, buy our insurance because old fogies buy Allstate, and Progressive is not like Allstate or like State Farm. Buy our insurance and stay young. Okay, really, that's the subtle message. That's the message of a lot of products. Okay, you can beat. You don't have to get old. You don't. Take our vitamins, take our pill, and you will not age. They're trying to sell you that you're not going to die and you can stay young forever. And we know from a biblical worldview that is not true. So that would be an example of how to evaluate cultural text and cultural messages in light of biblical worldview. Okay. Now, I mentioned some of these words that you're going to come across in the Van Hooser article. Here's where I got this article. The terms are locution, illocution, and perlocution. Locution is a phrase or sentence that has meaning and structure. Okay, for example, the sentence pass the salt. Okay, so here locution simply is this. We're going to evaluate pass the salt. It involves one, the word pass, the physical action of conveying from one person to another. And two, a crystalline compound used to flavor food. That's the meaning. But it also has a structure, some of which, like word order, is obvious. We have to say pass the salt. We can't say pass salt the. So all this is saying, locution is just simply saying that which we speak or that which we write takes on a certain form. It's analyzing the grammar and the spelling and the word order. It's just basic word interpretation. All right, you have to do that in communication. Locution goes a little bit deeper. It asks the question, what's the intention of the speaker? So when the person says, pass the salt, why are they saying it? Because they want the salt. All right, so we're moving beyond the words to the intention of the speaker. Her intent, in other words, is to end up with the salt shaker. Now you go, wow, that's pretty basic stuff. Why are these big words being used? Well, sometimes we forget that the words are different than the intention. And then there's a third thing called perlocution. And that is, what effect do I want my words to have on somebody else? So there's the intention of the speaker, but then there's a third part of speech called perlocution that involves the listener. It's the effect on the hearer of the utterance, what is also called uptake. What do I want them to do? I want them to pick up the salt shaker and pass it to me. So when you read the Van Hooser article and they say focus on page 45 and there's a paragraph, that's what it's asking. What's the word structure? What's the intention? What's the effect that it's going to have upon the listener? All right, so those are your assignments. You got 2 chapters, you've got an essay, and you've got a discussion board. I'm looking forward to seeing how you do. All right, God bless you. Have a great week.